here I am in desperation when my 2-year-old is, having a temper tantrum. And I'm like, oh my goodness, wow. Like, I need the Lord's grace and help. I need patience in this moment. I don't know what to do. And it's interesting because these things come up more like time and time again. And I see how much I need the grace of God.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Ruth Jo Simons podcast. In celebration of Mother's Day this month, I'm sitting down to talk with a couple of my friends about the wild and wonderful journey of motherhood. Today, I'm talking to Jinger Vuolo, who is a best-selling author and mom to 3 young children. Having been a part of her family's reality TV series for many, many years, she's here today to share her thoughts on what she's learned through her experiences then and now. Oh, Jinger, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Ruth.
We're kind of like new friends. I got to just meet you. What was it? Was it last year or the year before at the Ark Encounter when we were both speaking there?
I believe it was last year. Yes, last year.
All of it
special.
mixes together. But I got to just say, new friends, but immediately feeling like, oh my goodness, we could sit and talk for hours. And so I had to have you on because I figured we have some good conversations in us.
Oh, 100%. It was such a treat meeting you at that conference. And I've just been so impacted by all of your books. And it's been a huge blessing for my soul.
You were a really, really kind friend. And it's so sweet because I feel like just as a mama who's, just a little season ahead, with my oldest, he's going to be 23 tomorrow, actually, at the time of this recording. And I'm 11 years out from having a newborn, but you're just any day now at the time of this recording about to welcome your third. And so how are you feeling? How are you doing?
We're really excited.
Are you feeling relaxed and calm?
Well, I wish I could say I am. I feel like there's so much happening around our house. We have a lot of like home remodel projects happening, getting our kitchen cabinets painted tomorrow. And I am less than a week away from my due date. And so, this is baby number 3. We have 2 girls. One is 6 and the other one is 4. And then we have a little boy on the way.
Oh my goodness. I am so excited. And I just can't wait. I can't wait to see all that the Lord will do through your growing family. How special and exciting, but also get some rest. So I'm so thankful that you squeezed this conversation in because you're just going to need a little time,
Just a little breather. I know. It's interesting because you have only boys and we have 2 girls right now. And so there's this certain reality of, okay, we're entering a new season with baby number 3. It's going to be such a change for us, I'm sure. Having a little boy energy in the house, I've heard, is different than girl energy.
Well,
so
you
see.
can text me anytime. So I will be happy to pass along anything I know. But I'm so grateful that you're here because, I don't get to do conversations like this very often because of scheduling and things like that. But in honor of Mother's Day, I wanted to have a couple of really specific conversations with moms and spiritual moms in the church who can give just perspective on what it is that we get to contribute in our homes, in our communities, through our local church, how we can disciple and encourage and how we can steward the role of motherhood really well. And, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you, and I want to give you a few minutes to just quickly share even with any listener who may not be familiar with your time on TV and your story. I wanted to specifically have a conversation with you today about motherhood and how we steward it when sometimes our lives are a little public and sometimes when we're just trying to navigate what it looks like to steward our vocation, our opportunities to speak and share, and the ways in which we might in ministry even be on display sometimes, but how we navigate the inner and private life of motherhood and how we, all the things that might come up with this topic. But I have so many thoughts about just what it is we are doing here when we're, actually discipling and raising up little human beings. And yet we have this incredible opportunity like you to write a best-selling book and to be on podcasts and in the past also to be on TV. How do you steward all these things? So that's a really big setup, but I would just say if you could just give our listeners a little perspective on your journey thus far.
Yeah. So I was raised in a home where my parents, they taught us the gospel from an early age. And that was such a blessing. We had that as a foundation for life. And at the same time, we also followed a teacher who had claimed to speak for God, but didn't. And he shared a lot of things that were not actual Bible. So I kind of grew up in this mix of confusion when it came to figuring out what God's word actually said. So anyhow, throughout the years, it was kind of interesting. That was like the spiritual side, my faith journey. And it wasn't until I was 14 that I was truly saved. But rewind, go back a little bit. My family was on TV from the age of 10. When I was 10, there were camera crews that approached my family and asked if they could do a 1 hour documentary about my family. And so my parents had prayed about it. My dad was in politics for many years before that. So there was a certain side of the public life that we knew and on a very small scale. So he served 2 terms in the Arkansas State House. So that had a little bit of media around it with just the AP. They picked up a couple photos of our family, put them on a magazine. Parents Magazine did an article, and that's where my family was first discovered by Discovery Health at that time. And so they did this 1 hour documentary when my mom had 14 kids. And so it was called 14 Children and Pregnant Again. And that was the first pilot episode on Discovery Health. And it did so well. It was the highest rated show they had on the network. So they came back and approached my parents and asked if they could do another documentary. So they ended up doing about 3 more. And then after that time, they came back and approached them and asked if they could do a reality show. And the interesting thing about that was my family did not watch any TV. We had no cable TV in our house. We didn't even have a screen. We didn't even have like an actual TV. I think we had a very small, like square little TV, probably like the size of my face. It was that tiny, and it would go in the closet.
Or was it from the teaching and the paradigm of some of what you were running adjacent to spiritually?
It was more so in the realm of the teachings that we followed with Bill Gothard. And so of course no cable TV, which I'm not a fan of cable TV to this day. I think that there's, we have a couple channels that come with our Wi-Fi, but that's about it. And I think that's fine. But at the same time, I think it was a fear that if you expose your family to anything that is not inherently biblical, or maybe it's music with drums in a movie, it's going to be bad and you're going to call demons into your life. Very superstitious. And so I think that was
had a lot of that in my life.
Teaching.
I knew somebody who was like, we could talk about, I didn't want to spend a lot of time going backwards on this, but I got to just tell you, Jinger, when I was a young believer, there was somebody in our Chinese American church who was a big Gothard fan. And I actually was terrified of music, and I was terrified of a lot of those things when I was really young, and nobody kept leading us in that direction. So it never, my parents weren't even saved at that point. And so I just never really had, nobody brought me into that. But when you say those things, I'm like, whoa, I remember thinking, can I even use hair gel? Am I allowed to? There's just like lots of little things that I thought, oh, this is not going to please the Lord. And those were extra biblical things, So.
Yes, it's interesting how that plays a huge part in your life and how you view your relationship with God and what he expects of you. And that was true in our lives. And so it was interesting because when the camera crews came around, it was something that felt so foreign to us. Because they would say, yeah, just act like we're not here. We're going to follow you in your daily life. So we would go brush our teeth, start our homework for the day. We would be doing music practice, or one of the kids is learning to drive. And they would literally just be showing up and filming us. At the beginning, it was just for the documentaries. And then once it turned into a reality show, they were there anywhere from 3 to 5 to 6 days a week. They were in our house. And
Wow.
so it was a very interesting setup, because here you go from having somewhat of privacy, being homeschooled,
Mm-hmm.
being more
Yeah.
sheltered, and then you have strangers in your house
Mm-hmm.
who quickly felt like family because they were there so
Right.
often, but they're
Right.
unbelievers, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a unique experience.
Wow. Wow. And how old were you during that whole season? I mean, it was for several
Yes, so
years,
it
right?
went from 10 all the way up until 27. So
Oh,
about
I
4
didn't realize
years
it was,
ago,
yeah.
4 years ago the show ended. And we were a part of it until the end. We didn't
Wow.
realize our obligations fully, and so
Mm.
that was another aspect where we were a part of the show until it ended.
Well, Ginger, I mean, thank you for sharing like that brief history here. But I will just say, when I think about how many things in motherhood we have to steward in terms of how to teach our children how it is to please the Lord, and yet wanting to not teach them to be little Pharisees who are trying
Mhm,
to like just do the right thing and make everybody proud of them, but to actually know their need for Christ. What is it when you think about parenting now? When you think about being a mama to
mhm,
three, what about your upbringing, the past, the good and the really hard, the things that you
mhm,
now know, like this was not God's word, and the things that you're like, okay, but this I want to cling to. How do you approach? I know this is probably can be broken down, but when you think in your everyday life as you're
mhm,
teaching your two young girls, what are the things that kind of are at the forefront of your mind when you're mothering, when you think,
mhm,
okay, I want to pass on the truth here and I don't
mhm,
want to slip into this other part that so characterized my past?
mhm. Man, that's such a good question. I feel like for me, it's been a challenge to realize that. I think going back to those teachings for just a second, just because
Mm,
they affected so much of how I viewed God and how he viewed me as his child. I think that's
mhm,
something that has been tough to work through, um, because I was given such an amazing foundation in knowing that, I cannot come to God bringing him anything, that
mm,
salvation is not by works. So I knew that. But then when it played out in how I would operate day in and day out, whether it was reading my Bible, things like
mhm.
that, it was very legalistic. And
Right.
at the same time, there were these principles that were promised to be a guarantee for success. So if you follow these
Mm,
principles, your family will turn out. All of your kids will turn out. They'll be a light to the nations. You're going to be
yeah.
walking with the Lord. All of them will walk with the Lord. So there was this false guarantee of success that you wanted for your family. And when I left those
Right.
teachings right before I got married, it was interesting because then I had this fear of parenting. I thought, wow, if
Yes.
I don't have everything prescribed, if I don't
Mhm.
know the length of skirt that my kids are to wear, or if they're supposed to wear skirts at all, then this is going to be something that I have to actually rely on the Lord for. I have to pray and ask
Yes.
God for help every step of the way, instead of feeling like when I was 14, I would look at parents whose kids were rebelling and I would say, I know where you went wrong, because Bill Gothard had principles for everything. It was
Right.
fully prescribed. And so I thought parenting is going to be so easy because you're just going to follow the prescription. And even if you're not, sadly, a lot of people would say, even if you're not a
Oh,
believer,
man.
your kids will still
Mm,
turn out right and you won't have to have a reliance on the Lord. So, with that,
mm.
zooming out and taking that away was actually so helpful,
Yep.
because
Yeah.
here I am in desperation when my 2-year old is, having a temper tantrum. And I'm like, oh my goodness, wow, like I need the Lord's grace and help. I need patience in this moment. I don't know what to do. And it's
Yes.
interesting
Yeah.
because these things come up more like time and time again. And I see how much I need the grace of God. And I
Mhm.
just have to say, my mom is one of the sweetest, godliest women I know. She is so patient. I don't remember her getting angry at us. She would always choose
Mhm.
to lower her voice and take a
Mhm.
minute, take a breather if she felt like she was getting frustrated. And that was something that I do remember and I want to emulate. She is so
Yeah.
godly, so sweet. And that was a choice she made early on.
Yes.
She said her first 3 kids, it was a struggle. And so seeing how she navigated those hard times, trusting in the Lord was an encouragement to me
Mm-hmm.
and something that I see as not easy.
No, and I think it's so understandable that we would all hope that there's a manual or, you know, why are babies not just born with this like perfect manual for like how to do this and get good results? I mean, you want a formula for parenting. You want to know that you can nail it and that your kids will be respectful and will have self-control and will get good grades and go to school and make you proud and do all those things. And I have my version. I've written about how I grew up between two cultures, and my Asian
Mm,
background has a whole version of perfection and
mm,
approval seeking and some form of legalism in behavior. I had my version of that as I came to Christ and realized, oh, I kind of feel like there's some way in which I can be so amazing that I don't need God's grace. And I think in
mm,
motherhood, there's this lie in our minds that we're like, God's here to help me, but somehow if I were to do it right, I'm not going to have to be weak in this. We think
mm,
that that's possible when the truth is every single thing that God calls us to is meant for us to ultimately find him faithful, find him
mm,
sufficient, to find ourselves weak and lacking, and yet
mm,
Christ strong and absolutely sufficient for all our needs. Because what we really need is for the impossible standards, the law, but the
mhm,
impossible standards of motherhood, even the patience, the kindness, the not losing our temper, the knowing
mm,
what to say when that child is going off the rails, the knowing what to feed them, what to say yes to,
mhm,
when they should have a cell phone,
mm,
when and how, dating's even a possibility. All those things take discernment. There's not a formula and a perfect rule book that's going to show us that if we do it this way, we're going to succeed at it. And therefore, we're going to, I don't think we set out to be like, I want to be prideful in my motherhood, but I think all of us want to succeed and somehow feel like
mhm,
I didn't fail at this. I'm not lacking in this. And yet, somewhere early on, I think it was when I had my third or fourth, maybe, well, yeah, somewhere around there, I started the hashtag motherhood is sanctifying because I think I
mhm,
just realized that while I thought I was somehow supposed to be all wise in raising these little people and help them know Jesus and live a good life and somehow make, good decisions, that really what was happening while I was tasked with this impossible job, I was realizing God wanted me to see that I was the one who is being sanctified. I was the one in my
mm,
weakness needing to be refined,
mm,
needing to come before the Lord and to truly declare, I don't have all wisdom in this. I don't have the perfect track record for how to be a mother. I need to
mm,
point my kids to Jesus. And so really it is about going first, right? It's not looking at the rule book and being like,
mhm,
these 10 things will ensure a good home, a healthy
mhm,
home, happy children. It's really saying, I'm a Christ follower. And if my kids have any hope to like know the real Jesus, I need to point them to Christ as I live
mm,
in the authenticity of I need the Lord every day. And I hear you
mm,
basically saying like, um, yeah, even the prescriptive ways in doing it were empty in themselves. They might be
mhm.
good tips, but they don't save us.
Yes, totally. That is so helpful and so good, especially from somebody who's further down the road because we're just in the baby stages of parenting with a six and a
Hmm.
half year old, as our oldest. And it is that reliance and trust. But like you said, that sanctification has been more real than anything. Just seeing
Hmm.
how my responses often show up in our girls. And if I
Hmm.
have a bad attitude, then I see them turn around and snap with a bad attitude. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so convicting. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it is that process of trusting in God, trusting Him with our kids, trusting Him with even knowing what's best for us in the sanctification process and
Hmm.
how it's uncomfortable. It's not easy in parenting. But then just realizing that it is a huge gift from God to refine
Yeah.
us, but then also to bring joy to our lives.
Yeah. even if you're not on TV,
Mm-hmm.
because we are living in a world now where to get the message out or to try and use social media for good, sometimes I think people are wrestling with this question of how much of my life do I put out onto the internet? How much do I share of my personal life? In some ways, we are even imposing upon ourselves a sense of fishbowleness, right? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
social media users are like creating camera people around them because we live in a world where that's how you get attention. That's how we even see all the time, the best content is that really real content of just a day in the life and following you around. And it's not unlike reality TV. And so, as a mama of 6, 23 to 11, and you're in a different season of motherhood, but I think a lot of what you and I are facing every day in the work that God's called us to, there's a lot of similarities in there. And I would love to
Mm-hmm.
hear, because I wrestle with this every day. This is not me asking you a
Mm-hmm.
question being like, I have the perfect answers for how I do this. But I would say, I just think it would be helpful to flesh out, like, how do I make these choices every day? What are some things that you
Mm-hmm.
think of every day when you think, okay, so um, I, this is our first conversation about the show that you were on. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that it spanned that many years. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I just didn't do the math. I didn't think through how much you lived your life with a camera crew. And so, but even for those of us who are not on reality TV,
Mm-hmm.
there's a pressure on social media to almost like, did you have your quiet time if you didn't post about it? Did
Right.
your kids, um, are you having a wonderful day with your kids if you don't
Mm-hmm.
share all about that happening? And that's not to say that we don't share the joyous moments or that we don't tell
Mm-hmm.
the good news of how we're growing in the Lord. I mean, I'm on social media. I've been on for like 15 years. So this is not me
Mm-hmm.
knocking that. I actually just had an episode come out about social media
Mm-hmm.
and my guardrails for it. So this is not knocking that, but it is saying as moms, we have to think through this. And especially from
Mm-hmm.
your perspective, having gone through reality TV.
I think that having grown up in the public eye, it was something that I just was kind of, thrown into, and
Mhm.
it was the Lord's providence. And I see that. And at the same time, I think there's a healthy respect or healthy reality that I face when I come to it, because I have seen the negative sides of it, where when you walk through challenges, you just wish that nobody knew who you were, or
Wow.
when something airs that you're just, thinking, "Oh, I can't believe that was caught. I would much rather that not be shown on TV." There are those moments where you pause and you know what the critics are going to say, and you know the attacks that are going to come because of it. And having been in that place from a young age, there was also, I think, a lack of trust that started to form. And I started to think, okay, I've got to think very strategically when I come to social media. When I got on social media, it was shortly after I was married. That was 8 years ago. And at that time, I feel like social media was just kind of, it was stirring. There was Facebook, but Instagram was
Mhm.
just taking off more before TikTok, all of this. Maybe it was before TikTok. I wasn't on TikTok, at least. And it was just this unique stage. And so I got on it, shared a couple photos, and immediately realized, oh, wow, this is next level. Because even with the show, people will
Yeah.
watch it. They might email you, or they they would say some nice comment, or there would be hateful emails that would come. But social media is a different level. It's a different beast.
Mhm.
And it was something that, as Jeremy and I were praying through what the Lord would have us to
Mhm.
do moving forward, we realized, okay, this is interesting, because, like, for instance, we posted a photo on our honeymoon flying to Australia, and there was a picture that one of the crew members had taken from across the aisle, and I had one side of my face was shaded, and so it looked like I had a black eye. And they were like,
Oh, goodness.
Jeremy's beating her. And this was on our
Stop
honeymoon.
it. Stop it.
And
Oh,
it was like, immediately I mean, I was just thinking, okay, this is a different thing, because
oh my
with the
goodness.
show, you
Yeah.
do have the negative, you have the critics, all of the things.
Hmm.
But this is so instant, and people are behind their
Sure.
screen. They're willing to say whatever they want to say. And so we
Yeah.
had prayed about, even before we got married, what would the Lord have us to do? Would he have us to continue the show or to fade into the background? And for me, I thought, okay, we're fading into the background. Jeremy was pastoring a small church plant
Hmm.
on the border of Mexico. And I did not want the show to be a distraction to that,
Hmm.
because I knew that could easily become a thing where people would come to church maybe just to
Hmm.
say
Sure.
hello or meet. And I did not want that in a small church setting. And
Hmm.
at the same time, it was not, at that point, it was not an option for me to stop filming. And so we just trusted the Lord in that. And
Hmm.
we waited a year to have our first. And so when we had Felicity, that was another level of working through and navigating, what do you share, what do you not share. And so
Hmm.
her life was shared on the show because we were obligated to it at that point. And moving forward, though, we knew that we wanted to have our kids off of that side of things, because
Hmm.
I don't look back at my childhood at all and say, oh, I wish it was a different way, because
Mm.
that would be wrong. And even with what my parents did, they were amazing parents, and they really sought to do what was best for us. They saw the show in the beginning stages, at least, just as like a ministry opportunity to
Mm.
share, the hope of Christ with people. And it was something that, for me to look back and say, oh, I hate that people would have to see me grow up, or any of those things, would be wrong, because it was the providence of God that led us there. And when we walked through the hardest seasons of our life, where it was not popular to be a Duggar, it was, that name was tainted, then
Mhm.
you saw, even in those moments, where there was a level of hardship that I wish that I could have privacy. I wish that no one knew
Mhm.
who I was. So with that, we wanted to protect our kids moving forward. That was something that we landed on early on. And Evie's birth, like, there were segments of it, our second, and her birth was kind of like, not her birth, but like we filmed some of that was to be given to the network. And when it was, the Lord shut the show down at that point. And that was a
Mm.
huge answer to prayer for us, because here we were wrestling with not wanting to have our kids in the social media side of things, and still being obligated to be in that place. And so God was kind, and he gave us this ability to be able to still share our lives in a way we felt comfortable as adults, but then also to give our kids the privacy we felt like they deserved. And seeing social media
Mhm.
over those years grow and change, and like you said, it's not something where you have to have a reality show to be in that place, because social media, as you said, has become its own reality show. It's,
Mhm.
you see the intimate details of someone's life. You see their waking up in the morning. You know their daily routine because they share it with you.
You think you
Every
do.
detail of their life.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
You think you do.
Because you see this pattern, and it
Mhm.
automatically leans towards, oh wow, they have it all together. They
Mhm.
have the perfect family. They have the perfect life, and I don't have that. And I
Yeah.
think that comparison as moms is so easy, but then also for parenting, there's a certain pressure that puts on you to
Mhm.
keep everything up, to have the perfectly clean house, all the things that everybody
Right.
wants. And at the end of the day, I think that it's a huge blessing to have social media to share truth, to be able to even give a glimpse into your life, because there's so
Mhm.
many dysfunctional families. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that the heart motive behind it is the
Yeah.
issue. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes I think I can even wrestle with this coming out of that performance of TV. It is a performance, because you know
Mhm.
that you're not going to get the ratings or the clicks if it's not presented in a certain way. And
Sure.
so knowing that, it's like we are living our lives
It's so subtle,
hopefully to
but it
glorify
it
God, But then ultimately, it's if we're looking to those people on social media, or even the person who is our friend who follows us on social media, to validate us, to say, wow, you're doing such an amazing job, then ultimately we're looking to the wrong place for that fulfillment. Because the second something comes up where we mess up, or our kid falls and, like somebody's like, oh my goodness, you shouldn't have had them trying to ride their bike at 4, like, how could you? Well, then at that point you realize, oh, wow, well, I was taking all of my approval and acceptance. I was trying to get it from the people on social media or from my friend group, the likes and the comments and all of that. As much as I want to live for the praise of others, that criticism will cut you to the core if that's what you're living for. And so that's been the struggle, has been seeing that and saying, okay, Lord, I want to use this as a tool, because you've given it to me, and there's a stewardship involved that I see in this stage of my life. It may not be forever. There have been seasons where we've prayed about just going off of all social media, fading into the background. And ultimately that has not happened yet, because there is so much that I want to say before I would do that, before I would totally disappear off of social media. And so it's a challenge, right? Where we face this difficulty.
And here's the thing. Everything you described about network TV, I feel like really does exist in social media, no matter whether you're building a platform or you're just posting things for your friend. There are ratings. You do get measured. You do feel the pressure of whether you did it well or not, or whether people like you or not. Those pressures are all real. And even if it's subtle, even for those who are in Christ, who want to please the Lord, if we're not careful, they do affect and change the way we act and the way we operate and what goes through our minds as our motivation, right? I remember early on, because our family, I would say we still are not this like ritualistic family devotions every night kind of family. But oftentimes we were all sitting together at the dinner table, and Troy would just say, hey, this was the littles were pretty young, and they would just sit there trying to finish up dinner, and Troy would be like, hey, I'm just going to read a passage real quick and ask a few questions, and then let's talk a little bit before everybody scatters and goes and does the dishes. And early on, I would catch a few of those moments because I'd go put my dishes away, and I'd come back and I'd hear him sharing something pretty meaningful with the boys, or they would respond. So I'd hide behind the wall and I'd take some photos. Anybody who has followed me for a long time would maybe remember this is like a good 7 years, 8 years back. Or I would discreetly try to take a video. But at some point I realized, okay, this inspires families. And then we ended up writing like a family devotional kind of worship book. But I stopped taking those videos when I realized there was an expectation of him, or that somehow, um, if I felt like I had the pressure to share that content, that changed me even being present in that moment. And so, you're not asking, but as a mama who's just a little bit further ahead, if I may, I'll just tell you a couple of the things that we've had to learn over the years is that, because I don't feel the need at this point, not only do I not feel the need, I don't feel that the Lord has called me to get off social media entirely. But I have had to, over the years, as the boys have grown, to reconsider year by year how I'm using this, how did they play a part in it, and how I'm going to tell them about it. And some of the things that I've really thought through over the years is that I really do think that in some ways our family is in ministry together. I think it is really important to tell not just the hard moments, but the good moments. Like the fact that I've really enjoyed the teenage years. Well, somebody should probably declare that teen years aren't all terrible, and that there are small ways that we could build a life where we end up reaping some fruit of parenting. It's not just, oh my goodness, enjoy it while it lasts. They're going to hate your guts when they're teens. So I do feel like it's a joy to be able to share some of those things, but in authenticity to also share how hard parenting can be sometimes, how hard motherhood can be. But I'm not using my kids as the content in the sense of, this is what he said, this is what he did, here's the temper tantrum. Oh my goodness, because because the content that they can love you for can turn just as quickly, like you said. It can be the content that suddenly becomes the lightning rod for which nobody likes you. And so we cannot use content, and especially our children, as the means by which people find us super relatable or super encouraged. And so there's got to be that content has to be something I own. It's me and the Lord, and I'm doing it through writing or sharing. And if my kids have a story to tell, or if I have a moment that I can share about that, one of the rules we have is that I always ask them about it. I always talk to them. I'll say, how do you feel about me sharing this? And then once I write about it, I'll say, did I accurately describe what we went through as a family? Are you cool with the way I said it? Because I want them to know that I don't take a photo or take a quick little moment in video or write about it in a way where they're like, oh, did I just get used for B-roll? And sometimes we'll specifically, and you know what B-roll is, and we'll specifically say, hey, mama's going to be making a reel about this sometime later, but I'm not going to have your voices or anything. You guys okay with me just taking some B-roll? Just you guys keep doing your thing. And so I'm being really honest about it. I'm not trying to pretend it's all real life. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to be sharing or writing about the specific thing. I need a little video assets. Will you guys just go walk and I'll do some video? And the more I'm transparent about what I'm doing, the more they don't feel like they're pawns in a project. You know, they're not like playing a part. They're not actors. And so at every stage of Grace Laced growing and every stage of my author and speaking world growing, I've included them. And I say things like, hey, mama's going to go and speak at an event. And you'll come with me on another one, but this one you're not coming with me, but this is what I'm going to be sharing on. In fact, I'm going to tell the story about such and such thing. And I tell them the story I'm going to share. And so there should be no reason why they ever read about their mom from a magazine or on the internet or hear in a video that is shared on YouTube. I can't think of a single chapter that they would ever read from one of my books where they'll say, oh, that's surprising. Or, oh, wait, I didn't know they told that story. Or that's a side of her that I didn't know. That's my highest goal, is that I'm the exact same person when I'm cleaning out the fridge and slightly frustrated as when I'm writing a book or sharing a beautiful Instagram post, that's the same person and they wouldn't be surprised by the words that I'm using. So that's kind of just like that little bit of a filter I use every day where I think to myself, will my kids know? Will they say, oh, I can attest this is the same person? And, oh, I remember when she took that video. Or, oh yeah, we talked about how this story that we experienced at the mall or whatever we were doing, that this would be a really great way to share such and such, that they're part of it. So
that is
that's just something
beautiful.
we do.
I think that is so wise, especially the older your kids get with grown kids, that there would not be any of those regrets of oversharing or sharing a story that maybe they weren't comfortable with, because that can backfire real quick with your first mission being your family and your kids. So that's such helpful wisdom too from someone who's further ahead. And yeah, so we have just chosen to like not share our kids' faces on social media, to not share too much about them, because it's a different element. It's a different level. Like I have a lot of siblings who still share their kids in such a tasteful way. They share their lives with the world, and they do such a good job of that. And I respect it. And at the same time, it's like where we are in this season and also in the location we live in, there are different elements to that where we've saw it as just even in this season of life when they're so young, to protect their privacy, their faces from social media. And so that's kind of the route we've gone. Talk less about them and the details of their life to give them that safety and privacy. But I think that I love what you said about going to them and including them in the ministry that God has called you guys to as a family. And even if they're not there every day, that they know that mom is thinking about them and that you care for their hearts. And so I think that's so beautiful to hear.
Well, as we wrap up, Jinger, I know that you're about to have a new baby, but you also had a book baby come out recently. And as we wrap, will you just let my listeners know a little bit about that project, the heart behind it, why you wrote People Pleaser, and also just how they can connect with you.
Yes. So I did just write a book, and it's called People Pleaser: Breaking Free from the Burden of Imaginary Expectations. And it was something that was on my heart. It kind of goes back to the social media thing where we can be a certain way when we are presenting ourselves to our friends, to our loved ones, to our church communities, online. There are so many elements where performance can kick in, and we start to either perform for others, or we try to isolate ourselves from others to keep up a certain persona to where they don't see our lives, where they don't know us. No one knows who we are. And there are these elements of people pleasing that I saw show up throughout my life, and just seeing the need for speaking up now with social media being so big to this younger audience, people who are younger than me who are struggling with how to navigate that, but then also just in daily relationships, and how do we authentically share our lives? Who do we share our lives with? Who, what older godly women do we have around us that we're being accountable to, that we're asking for wisdom and advice? And so when we're people pleasing, it's hard to do that. So I wanted to kind of just share my journey through that, share some stories that are raw, real, and hopefully it'll be helpful. And so that's available wherever books are sold. I also have an audiobook of that one because it was something that I realized in this season of my life. Audiobooks are my best friend. And so I wanted to make that available for other moms. And so, yes, but you can find me on social media at Jinger Vuolo. That's Jinger, Jinger Vuolo. And then we have a podcast, the Ginger and Jeremy podcast, that I get to do with my wonderful husband. So much fun. And so, and then I have another book as well, which kind of covers the topic that we spoke about today. And that one was called Becoming Free Indeed. And it just exposes the teachings that I was raised under that were more fear-based and superstitious. So if anybody's coming out of that, that's a book that I would highly recommend because it's more of a theological memoir. Hopefully it'd just be helpful to walk through those teachings.
And I think, I'm so grateful that you've chosen to write on these topics, Ginger, because I think as mamas, we forget how much that our internal, wrestling with the Lord theologically and understanding the gospel of grace and understanding who God is, God's character, how we're truly saved, what he really desires from us. What is it that we need to do or what we don't need to do to please him and to earn his favor? All those things ultimately translate into how we mother and how we raise the next generation. And so I'm so grateful that you peel back the layers on those topics. And even with people pleasing, recognizing that this is not just a quick, little thing that we're supposed to stop doing this and start doing this, but really let's look at what's going on in our hearts and what is the role of our love for Jesus. When we love the Lord, that will change all these other aspects of our lives. So thank you. I'm so grateful for you, and I hope we get to see each other real soon. And thank you for taking the time to share your heart with this audience. And I'm so hopeful that today's episode was an encouragement to anyone who's listening, whether you are a mama or whether you are working through different beliefs in your past or in your current that's affecting the way you live your life. And if this has been helpful, I just encourage you to share this podcast with your friends and family. Leave us a review, and we'll be excited to speak to you next time. Have a great day, guys.
Access more